My name's Ann Huizinga. I am a community planner with Urban Systems, and we are hosting this event tonight. And I cannot tell you how excited we are to have 4 members of RISE joining us tonight for the presentation. For those of you who don't know, RISE is Reconciliation in Solidarity Edmonton, and they're a group that was formed after the Truth and Reconciliation. So the way tonight's going to work is Miranda's going to give a little bit of an overview. She's one of the co-founders of RISE. And then we're actually going to go through with each of the panelists a question. We're going to have 10 minutes per question that they've kind of gone through on the slides. And then we're also going to have some just time for really important discussions.
Thank you all for being here tonight. It's always interesting to have a new gathering of people interested in hearing more about this topic and hear the questions and the responses and the comments that come out when we're talking about reconciliation. Before we get into the discussion about how we all got involved with RISE and what brings us to the cause of reconciliation, I wanted to share a little bit of information about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Some of you may have heard of it before or have some questions, and so hopefully this will bring us to a place where we're all coming from a common understanding. So the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was actually the result of the largest class action suit ever filed in Canadian history. In the late 1980s, survivors of the Shubenacadie Indian Residential School in Nova Scotia started forming legal action against the federal government and the church that ran the school for the abuses and the situation that they suffered. That led to other class action being filed across Canada that eventually became a national class action suit, which resulted in the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement that was signed in 2006. From that, the federal government settled out of court and agreed to a financial compensation package for survivors of residential school. Out of that, the survivors said, we want an opportunity to still give our testimony to the public because we won't have an opportunity to do that in court. And so out of that, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was formed. That meant that the survivors actually said, out of the financial package that you're giving us, we want a portion of it to go to the testimony and the opportunity for the public to learn about our experience. So I always think about those dollars that funded the TRC actually came out of the pocket of survivors. They could have taken that money and walked away, but they thought this is the most important thing that we can do for Canadians is help them understand what we went through. Through the mandate of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, they held 7 national events, with the final one in Edmonton in March of 2014. At a national event was an opportunity for survivors to give their testimony to the public, to other former students of the residential schools, intergenerational survivors, as well as the churches and government employees that operated the schools. It was also an opportunity for survivors to for members of the public to bear witness to the survivor stories and hear what happened. A lot of times for Canadians, this is the first time they heard about residential school, and so it was an awakening, I think, for our country. In December of 2015, the mandate of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission came to an end, and now the work is left for us as Canadians to do. Throughout the work of the Commission, their job was to continue to share the stories and the information they were learning through the documents they collected from church and government archives, as well as the testimony and stories that they got from survivors and former employees from the churches. That resulted in a few different documents. The first one produced in 2012, which was the interim report that shared what they had learned up to that point, and also included a document called They Came for the Children, which was the first time there was a documented testimony and account for Canadians to learn from. On June 2nd, 2015, just over a year ago last week, they released the executive summary of their final report and the 94 calls to action. The executive summary was the first real glimpse that Canadians had into the full work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and an opportunity to really learn the information that they collected through their mandate. The executive summary, when it came out, is 388 pages long. And people say, wow, that was the executive summary. What's the full report look like? While the full report is almost 3,800 pages long, 2.3 million words, 7 books, 6 volumes that document the full history. This includes the different aspects of residential school, positive and negative, how they came to be, the history of it, as well as the testimony and experience from firsthand accounts. December 15th, 2015, the full report was released. All these documents are available online for free. I feel like this is an opportunity for Canadians to have access to this information. If you never learned this in school and didn't know this history, ignorance can't be pleaded anymore. This information is available for everyone to learn and understand. The 94 calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission cover every portion of Canadian society. It's education systems, it's the legal system, it's the justice system, it's how teachers are trained, how government employees are trained, it's how the business community works with Indigenous people. Every part of Canadian society is affected by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. In November, I had an opportunity to sit in circle with one of the commissioners, Chief Wilton Littlechild. And he made a point to me that's kind of stuck with me since then. If you see news reports about the TRC recommendations, they're not recommendations, they're calls to action. And he made it very clear that we called them calls to action because a recommendation is a suggestion. You can take or leave someone's suggestion. A call to action requires a response. So I hope Canadians' response to the 94 calls to action is a resounding yes. If for no other reason, I think every Canadian should read the 94 calls to action, 20-page document, because our federal government has committed to implement all 94 calls to action. If the only reason you read it is for a financial reason, it's your tax dollars paying for it. So you should know what your tax dollars have been committed to. As I mentioned, in 2014, Edmonton played host to the 7th and final national event. It ended up being the largest national event of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission because this was the last opportunity survivors had to give their testimony to the TRC to be included in the final report. Our mayor, Don Iveson, served as an honorary witness. He was asked to be an honorary witness because different people in different communities were asked to be witnesses to the testimony so that they could use the information in how they carry out their own work. As a citizen of Edmonton, I feel like our mayor has stepped up to that cause, and I think that his time at the TRC has actually influenced a lot of the decisions he's made. He really reflected on his role as a parent and having 2 little kids at home and imagining what it would be to have the government knock on your door one day and take your kids away. As an intergenerational survivor myself, it was also an opportunity for me to give my testimony to the TRC and share the experience, my dad's experience, through my experience having him as a parent and what that's meant for my life and my decisions and my value system. The mayor also committed to a year of reconciliation in Edmonton that resulted in 3 different initiatives being planned by the city. An Aboriginal Youth Leadership Initiative, an education program for all city employees, as well as a commemoration to honor the TRC event that was held in Edmonton. These 3 commitments were made before the calls to action were released, and out of the 93, these are 3 of them. So the city of Edmonton's already committed to 3 of the 94 calls to action before it was even asked of them. So the 94 calls to action, as I mentioned, are a requirement and a response from all Canadians. It's not only going down the list and committing to the actions that some of us don't have control over. We can't necessarily say we're going to change the justice system, or we're going to change the curriculum, or we're going to affect change in the legal system, but we can think about the interactions that we have on a daily basis. Reconciliation is about a culture shift. It's about thinking about the relationships we have and how we interact and speak with one another. All of us can make that commitment by thinking about it every time we have an interaction and how we speak about this part of our history, how we speak about Indigenous people, and how we commit to, on a daily basis, making this a better place and a better community for all people. Before we get into the discussion, I just want to leave you with a quote from the executive summary, Honoring the Truth, Reconciling for the Future. The way we govern ourselves must change. Laws must change. Policies and programs must change. The way we educate our children and ourselves must change. The way we do business must change. Thinking must change. The way we talk to and about each other must change.